Is America mentioned in the Bible? And if the ancestors of most modern European Americans are mentioned in the Bible, where are they mentioned? The Bible is more or less the history of the 12 tribes of Israel. As most Bible students know, the 12 tribes of Israel left Egypt in the Exodus and settled in the land of Canaan. The 12 tribes lived in the land of Canaan under a loose confederacy for a couple of hundreds of years, until they united into a united kingdom of the 12 tribes of Israel under King Saul. That was followed by King David and his son, King Solomon. But King Solomon sinned against the God of Israel by worshipping various pagan gods and goddesses, and therefore the God of Israel decided that he would let 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel secede from the royal house of Solomon in Jerusalem. And that took place approximately 931 BC, when 10 of the northern 10 tribes of Israel, they seceded from the royal house of David and Solomon in Jerusalem and formed their own kingdom, which also was called the Kingdom of Israel, but only consisted of 10 tribes. But the 10 tribes of Israel, they continued to worship pagan gods and goddesses, and therefore eventually, approximately 200 years later, the God of Israel decided that he would remove the 10 tribes out of the land of Israel, because they were given the land of Israel because they were obedient to him, and when they became disobedient to him, he removed them out of the land of Israel. And that took place between 745 and 721 BC, when the Assyrian Empire invaded the northern kingdom of Israel and deported the vast majority of the inhabitants out of the land of Israel and settled them in northern areas of the Assyrian Empire. After the 10 tribes of Israel had been settled in northern areas of the Assyrian Empire, they moved out of the Assyrian Empire completely and vanished in the eyes of world history. The remaining 2 tribes in the kingdom of Judah, they eventually became known as Jews. Judah Jews. And the Jews, they kept on looking for the whereabouts of the 10 tribes of Israel, but at least among the mainstream of the Jews, they didn't know where they were. Now, the religion of the Jews, it is known as Judaism, and it is based on the text of the Old Testament, which Jews call the Hebrew Bible, and the Talmud, which interprets the Hebrew Bible. Now, the Talmud is written down by rabbis between the 3rd century and the 6th century AD. So the Talmud is a historical source that gives us a very good idea what mainstream Judaism and mainstream rabbis, the most important of them, they believed in the between the 3rd and the 6th century AD. And in the Talmud, all the rabbis that mention the 10 tribes of Israel, they believe that the 10 tribes, they were deported out of the land of Israel in the 8th century BC, as the Old Testament explicitly says, and that they never reunited with Judah. The rabbis in the Talmud, most of them believe that the 10 tribes eventually will be reunited with Judah, the Jews, but a minority opinion in the Talmud among the rabbis is that the 10 tribes are going to be forever lost. But through history, archaeology, Bible prophecy, and other things, we can trace the 10 tribes of Israel to Europe, and in particular the nations of northwestern Europe, and of course their descendants across the world. And not only can we trace the descendants of the lost 10 tribes of Israel to Europe and their descendants across the world, but we can also trace certain of the Israelite tribes to certain modern nations and peoples. For example, the tribe of Dan we can trace to the nation of Denmark, which is my own nation. I'm from Denmark, and this is filmed in Denmark. And the tribe of Dan can also be traced to the Republic of Ireland. The tribe of Reuben can be traced to the peoples of France. The tribe of Zebulun can be traced to the Netherlands. The tribe of Benjamin can be traced to the people of Iceland. The tribe of Ephraim can be traced to the peoples of the British Isles and other British nations, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, etc. And finally, the tribe of Manasseh can be traced to the United States of America. We certainly do not claim that all European Americans are Israelites, or that all European Americans who are Israelites are of the tribe of Manasseh, but Manasseh is the dominant tribe in the United States of America, and that's the subject of this video. 2,520 years of punishment fulfilled in America and Britain. In Leviticus chapter 26, verses 12 to 28, God told Israel that if they persisted in worshipping other gods, he would punish them 7 times. And after those so-called 7 times had expired, Israel would be let loose from God's punishment. Now, in Bible terminology, a time, it means 360 days or 360 years. So 7 times 360 years, that equals 2,520 years. Now, if we calculate the date of the conquest and deportation of the individual tribes of Israel, we should therefore arrive at the year when they were loosed from that punishment that God had placed upon them. So the tribe of Manasseh in Bashan, that was the area northwest of the Jordan River. So the tribe of Manasseh in Bashan, it was conquered by the Assyrian Empire in 745 BC. So 2,520 years later, after that date, we end up in AD 1776, which was also the year when the United States of America was founded by the signing of the Declaration of Independence on July 4th. The tribe of Ephraim, on the other hand, it was conquered and deported by the Assyrian Empire in 721 BC. The tribe of Ephraim, along with most of the other of the 10 tribes of Israel, they lived on the west side of the Jordan River. So 2,520 years later, we end up in AD 1801, which was also the year that the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland was formed. By calculating the 2,520 years of punishment on Israel, we can thereby confirm that Britain is Ephraim and the USA is Manasseh, at least the part of Manasseh that was in Bashan on the east side of the Jordan River. Joseph and European immigrants to America. The patriarch Joseph was taken to Egypt as a slave before he ended up as the Prime Minister of Egypt. Then his brothers came and bowed down before him, and Joseph took them under his protection. The story of the patriarch Joseph is similar to European immigration to America. Most of the immigrants from Europe, they left their home countries because they were poor and there were better possibilities in America. So these Americans of European descent, they in average became richer and more powerful than their kinsmen in Europe, and also after World War II, the United States protected Western Europe from Soviet aggression and helped Western Europe rebuild its economy through the Marshall Plan. The meaning of Manasseh's name. Biblical names matter. They are not coincidental. The name Manasseh means causing to forget, because Manasseh was born after Joseph had gotten out of prison and become Prime Minister of Egypt and gotten a wife. We read in the book of Genesis, quote, "And Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh. For God, said he, hath made me forget all my toil and all my father's house." Unquote. Genesis chapter 41, verse 51. Most European immigrants to the US, they must have had similar thoughts as Joseph after they had come to America. In Joseph's giving of names to Manasseh and Ephraim, we can also see the reason why Ephraim got the greater blessing than Manasseh, and we again quote from the book of Genesis, quote, "And the name of the second called he Ephraim, for God hath caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction." Unquote. Genesis 41:52. There is a parallel between the names of Manasseh and Ephraim and the names of the first 4 sons of Jacob and Leah. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. When the matriarch Leah gave names to her first 3 sons, the meaning of their names reflected the fact that Leah thought that Jacob did not love her and hopefully would love her because she gave birth to these 3 sons, which Jacob did not. But when Judah, the 4th son, was born, Leah did not think she was hated, but simply praised the Lord when she gave name to Judah. We again quote from Genesis. And she conceived again and bare a son, and she said, Now will I praise the Lord. Therefore she called his name Judah and left bearing. Unquote. Genesis chapter 29, verse 35. This parallel to Leah's first 4 sons is that when Joseph gave name to Manasseh, Joseph thought of all the misery and affliction he had left behind. But when Joseph gave name to Ephraim, he spoke of fruitfulness. Throughout the scriptures, there are several examples of brothers where the younger got the greater blessing instead of the older. For example, Cain and Abel, Ishmael and Isaac, Esau and Jacob, etc. In each case, the older was more materialistic than the younger. Although there is nothing bad or sinful in Manasseh's blessing, it is still more materialistic than Ephraim's. For example, the United States is huge in size, that is number 4 in the world, and it's also great in wealth. It is by far the largest economy in the world and has by far the highest living standard of the great nations of the world, and it's also great in the sheer number of inhabitants, that is number 3 in the world. Also, Americans have a down-to-earth mentality and take pride in the fact that they do not have a king, but that all citizens are considered equals. So this American egalitarian mentality, it is in stark contrast to the British Ephraimite class mentality, but it is quite related to the egalitarianism of France, which is Reuben. Machir, America. The only one of Manasseh's grandsons who is mentioned as being brought up upon Joseph's knees is Machir. We read about that in Genesis chapter 50, verse 23. The meaning of Machir is salesman, which also denotes materialism and again is a characteristic of the so-called American dream. America is named after the Florentine explorer Amerigo Vespucci, who was the first to recognize that the Americas were the so-called 4th continent. The Holy Spirit may have led the German cartographer Martin Waldseemüller to apply Amerigo Vespucci's name to the New World in 1507 because that it would be the new homeland of the descendants of Machir and Manasseh. Jephthah and the American Revolution. In the book of Judges, chapters 11 to 12, we read about the judge Jephthah from the land of Gilead, which was a part of the territory of Manasseh in Bashan. The judge Jephthah, he defeated the Ammonites who were about to invade Israel. But the Ephraimites complained to Jephthah that he had not asked them to send men to the battle and said that they would kill Jephthah and his house. In this story we find several parallels to Britain Ephraim and America Manasseh. First, the Ephraimites said to Jephthah that the Gileadites were fugitives from Ephraim. We quote from the book of Judges. Then Jephthah gathered together all the men of Gilead and fought with Ephraim, and the men of Gilead smote Ephraim because they said, Ye Gileadites are fugitives of Ephraim among the Ephraimites and among the Manassites. Unquote. Judges chapter 12 verse 4. And this is similar to the American Revolution, where the British colonists in the 13 American colonies rebelled and the English viewed them as quote-unquote fugitives and illegal separatists from England. And like Jephthah and the Gileadites defeated Ephraim, so did the 13 American colonies defeat England. And after the defeat, the Ephraimites tried to get back to the territory of Ephraim, but they were stopped at the Jordan River by the Gileadites. So in order to ascertain who were Ephraimites and who were not, the Gileadites told the men to pronounce the word Shibboleth, but the Ephraimites could not pronounce the H in the word and pronounced it Sibboleth. We quote, And the Gileadites took the passages of Jordan before the Ephraimites, and it was so that when those Ephraimites which were escaped said, Let me go over, that the men of Gilead said unto him, Art thou an Ephraimite? If he said, Nay, then said they unto him, Say now Shibboleth, and he said, Sibboleth, for they could not frame to pronounce it right. Unquote. The book of Judges, chapter 12, verses 5 to 6. This silent H is also found in English spoken in England. An example is from the musical My Fair Lady, where the English woman Eliza says, and pardon my bad pronunciation, in Ardford, Erford and Hampshire hurricanes hardly ever happen. Unquote. This dropping of the H in English may originate from the Norman conquest, because in French the letter H often is silent. And another example from another American war, the American Civil War in the 1860s. That's the first battle of the American Civil War. It was the Battle of First Manasseh. It's also known as the First Battle of Bull Run. And Manasseh, that's simply another way of saying the name Manasseh. So the American Civil War was essentially the Battle of Manasseh, or the Civil War of Manasseh. Geographic similarities between Manasseh and the United States. After the conquest of Canaan, the tribe of Manasseh received two territories. One west of the Jordan River, north of the territory of Ephraim, and another larger area east of the Jordan River in Gilead and Bashan. When the tribe of Manasseh is mentioned in the Bible, it is usually Manasseh in Gilead and Bashan. The tribes of Reuben and Gad also had their territories east of the Jordan River. In this, there is a similarity with the USA, which is divided from most of the other tribes in Europe. But in the Americas, there is also the French province of Quebec, which would be Reuben. And most of the nations in the Americas, they are of course Spanish and Portuguese speaking. And even though Spain and Portugal as nations cannot be considered Israelite nations, there is nonetheless a visible element of the Israelite tribe of Gad in those two nations, because the Visigoths, the Germanic tribe of the Visigoths, they were of the tribe of Gad, and they conquered the Iberian Peninsula in the 450s AD and became the progenitors of the Spanish and Portuguese elites in the Middle Ages. Latin America therefore has an element of Gad, even though the Latin American nations cannot be considered Israelite nations as nations. In the Americas, we therefore have the tribes of Manasseh, Reuben and Gad, just like these three tribes were east of the Jordan River in ancient Israel. Now, the ancient territories of Bashan and Gilead were large territories, and they were good for raising cattle. We quote from the book of Numbers. Now the children of Reuben and the children of Gad had a great multitude of cattle, and when they saw the land of Jazer and the land of Gilead, that behold, the place was a place for cattle. Unquote. Numbers chapter 31, verse 1. Likewise, the United States is huge in size compared to most other Israelite nations. The US also has more cattle than any other Israelite nation, that is 93 million. Compare this with the Israelite nations in Europe, which have 60 million, and Canada, which has 11 million, Australia, which has 24 million, New Zealand, which has 10 million, South Africa, which has 12 million, and the state of Israel, which has 500,000. Interestingly, both Reuben and Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh ended up with these territories east of the Jordan, but it was apparently only Reuben and Gad who asked Moses if they could get them. They were originally not supposed to get territory east of the Jordan, but got it anyway. So the reason why Manasseh did not ask for that land may be because Manasseh was more blessed than Reuben and Gad. Manasseh and the knowledge of our Israelite origins. From the late 16th century to the early 19th century, several people are known to have written about the Israelite origins of European nations, including at least 2 Frenchmen, a Swede, 2 Englishmen, and 1 Fleming, that is from Flanders in Belgium. But it was only with the lectures of the Scottish clergyman John Wilson in the 1830s and the publication of John Wilson's book, Our Israelite Origin, in 1840, that this precious knowledge became widespread and started the British Israel movement. The next great step forward in the popularity of this knowledge took place in the 1930s when the American radio evangelist Herbert W. Armstrong started the worldwide Church of God, where he also taught about the Israelite origins of European nations and, of course, European Americans. The fact that people of several nationalities did write about the subject but failed to gain popularity is a parallel to the blessing of the 11 tribes, which were smaller than Joseph's blessing, the patriarch Joseph. So the fact that this knowledge first became popular by the ministry of a Scotsman who would be of the tribe of Ephraim, and later by an American who would be of the tribe of Manasseh, that is a parallel to Ephraim's and Manasseh's blessings, which were larger than those blessings of the other tribes of Israel. Manasseh, the 13th tribe. Including Jacob's 2 adopted sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, Jacob therefore had 13 sons. These 13 sons became the ancestors of the 13 tribes of Israel. Throughout the Holy Scriptures, Israel consisted of 13 tribes, but still the tribes of Israel are always referred to as the 12 tribes of Israel and not the 13 tribes of Israel. And the reason for this is that 12 is a godly number and 13 is not a godly number. 13, on the other hand, is the number of rebellion, apostasy, defection, corruption, disintegration, and revolution, and that is according to E.W. Bullinger in his classic book, Numbers in Scripture. The number 13 is associated with misfortune because it spells the end of what exists, but in itself it is not necessarily bad. For example, if what exists is bad and it comes to an end, it is good that it ends and it is destroyed. And so the fact that Manasseh is or can be considered the 13th tribe, it is not bad in itself. It simply means that Manasseh was the last of the patriarchs and that the nation of Manasseh, America, is the last of the Western Christian Israelite nations to be a world superpower before the formation of an ungodly one-world government. And America in itself is also deeply connected with the number 13. The United States was, for example, formed when 13 colonies rebelled in the American Revolution. And also when in the American Civil War, 13 Confederate states rebelled against the Union. And then we have the Great Seal of the United States, which is a national symbol that was made in 1782. And it is used to authenticate official documents, and it is also featured on the $1 bill. The number 13 is all over the Great Seal. On the front side of it there is an eagle holding 13 arrows and an olive branch with 13 olives and 13 leaves. Above are the Latin words e pluribus unum, which means out of many, one. The reverse side contains a pyramid with the all-seeing eye above. Above are the Latin words annuit coeptus, which means he favors our undertakings, and which is a quote from the Roman poet Virgil's book, the Aeneid, written approximately 29 to 19 BC, where the hero Ascanius prays to the pagan god Jupiter. And below is the Latin phrase of 13 letters, Novus Ordo Seclorum, which means New World Order or New Secular Order. The symbolism of the Great Seal is Masonic, and that is because most of the founding fathers of America were Freemasons, even though the majority of ordinary Americans at the time of the American Revolution were God-fearing Protestants. Prophetic meaning of Manasseh. Manasseh and Ephraim were Joseph's 2 sons, but because Jacob loved Joseph, he adopted Manasseh and Ephraim as his own sons. We read from the book of Genesis, quote, "And now thy 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, which were born unto thee in the land of Egypt, before I came unto thee in Egypt, are mine. As Reuben and Simeon, they shall be mine." Unquote, Genesis chapter 48, verse 5. Now Jacob had 12 sons, of whom Joseph was one. When Jacob adopted Ephraim and Manasseh as his own sons, he therefore had 13 sons. Even though Manasseh was older than Ephraim, it was Ephraim who got the birthright. Manasseh could therefore be called the 13th tribe. So since Ephraim and Manasseh were much younger than their uncles, Jacob's sons, they were probably the last of the patriarchs to die. While the patriarchs lived in Egypt, they prospered, but after their deaths, the Pharaoh of the Exodus assumed office, and he hated the Israelites. And we quote from the book of Exodus. Now there arose a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. Unquote. Exodus chapter 1, verse 8. This is prophetic of our current day and age. Like the patriarch Manasseh, America is the last of the great Western nations. After America and its allies have clashed with Russia and China and their allies, a one-world government will be formed, which eventually will be headed by the Antichrist. The Exodus Pharaoh is a type of the coming Antichrist.